This is a reading from Whispers from Eternity. And these prayers of devotion, these poems, these words of Master are so thrilling, and some of them are so very sweet and touching. And this is one of a slightly different vein. Be thou the general in my invasion of ignorance. I bled, spreading thy name, and for thy name's sake I will ever bleed, with bloody limbs, broken body, wounded features, and bearing the thorn crown of derision. Yet, like a mighty warrior, will I fight undismayed, even there where the skirmish is thickest. With the sword of calmness I will stand firm against the hands of persecution. My disciplined armies of true aspiration, blowing trumpets in thy name, now march in triumph to seize the dark kingdom of God-denying souls. No matter how many blows I receive, and no matter how often the swords of persecution pierce my heart, I am content in the realization that thou knowest my craving to spread thy name. I will wear all my tribulations not as scars, but as medals given for courage, and as inspirations to strive ever harder in my fight against ignorance. O Lord, help me conquer darkness with thy golden message of light. Be thou ever the general in my invasion of the continent of ignorance. And this is our reading today from Rays of the Same Light by Swami Kriyananda. This is a passage from the Bhagavad Gita, the 3rd chapter. Desire obscures even the wisdom of the wise. Their relentless foe it is, a flame never quenched. Intellect, mind, and senses, these combined are referred to as the seat of desire. Desire through them deludes and eclipses the discrimination of the embodied soul. O Arjuna, discipline your senses, and having done so, work to destroy desire, annihilator of wisdom and of self-realization. Swamiji writes, in this passage, ego-motivated desire is described as the root cause of delusion. Desire suggests to the mind that freedom can be found only by satisfying its demands. This suggestion is a delusion. For, like a quenchless flame, desire burns only the more brightly after every fulfillment. Seeking release from desire by appeasing it is like placing wood on an already raging fire, hoping thereby to quench the flames. Indeed, the new wood may stifle the flames temporarily. Very soon, though, they rise again, higher than ever. Thus does desire manage to enslave us. To understand its workings, go back in time, back to a day in your own life when you felt perfectly happy. Recall to your mind the sense of completeness you enjoyed. Wasn't the happiness you felt due in great part, to the satisfaction of not needing anything? Imagine a day now of idyllic contentment. See yourself stretched out in a meadow, at perfect peace with the world. The birds are singing. Light breezes play over your face and arms. How pleasant to bask in the friendly warmth of the sunshine. How enchanting to gaze at the gay colors of the wild flowers around you. Have you ever enjoyed such an afternoon? Tell yourself now, all this would be perfect. In this visualization. Tell yourself now, all this would be perfect if only I had a camera to photograph the wildflowers. Note how, at first, this desire intrudes itself on your happiness almost unnoticeably. You continue to enjoy the flowers, the birds, the breezes, the warm sunshine. The thought of a camera you dismiss easily as insignificant. Gradually, however, a wisp of memory at a time, you recall other occasions that, had they been captured in photographs, you'd have been able to relive later more vividly. Regretfully, you tell yourself, if only I had the money to buy a camera. Suddenly, another thought springs into your mind. Not one of those cheap box cameras. They only take silly snapshots. What I need is a camera to which I can attach different lenses. And yes, a macro lens. That way I'd be able to take close-ups of these wonderful flowers. Suddenly, your contentment seems noticeably diminished, replaced by a vague sense of dissatisfaction. Well, you conclude, this discontentment will surely vanish once you've purchased that camera. And so you begin to work and scheme toward the fulfillment of your dream. Desire is an affirmation of lack, quite as much as one of anticipated fulfillment. It places conditions on our happiness. In that peaceful meadow, only now are you without peace, as you ask yourself, how can I be really happy again until I own that camera? The day finally comes when you hurry back to your meadow, the proud owner of the camera of your dreams. Are you happier now than you were before? You made yourself unhappy by the thought of not owning a camera. Now that that dissatisfaction has been removed, you feel at least a sense of relief, don't you? In your relief, however, aren't you reliving more or less the happiness you enjoyed that other afternoon? Oh, it's true you have the added pleasure of being able to photograph the wildflowers, assuming they're still in bloom. So now you think of angles, depth of focus, composition, all the while forgetting, perhaps, the soft play of breezes on your skin, the friendly warmth of the sun, the melodious singing of the birds. Well, let's say your delight in owning a camera is sufficient compensation. You love that camera. You love it so much, in fact, that you'll never forget the thrill you felt when acquiring it. Really, the only way you'll ever recapture that thrill is if you can manage to need and subsequently obtain more and more things. The whole process is not unlike pinching a fold of your skin on your arm for the wonderful sense of relief you feel when at last you release it. Meanwhile, in addition to the repetitive relief of removing conditions that you place on your happiness, you'll have also the fatigue that comes from the extra work required to satisfy your desires. People destroy their peace of mind, their health, their very lives by simply chasing after the will-o'-the-wisp of sense fulfillment. The irony is that happiness would have been theirs all the time if only they'd practiced the greatest virtue, contentment. There is a story of a simple American Indian who was befriended by a rich white neighbor. The wealthy man said to him one day, "It hurts me to see you working that little quarter acre of yours when I have so much property. Let me give you a few acres so you can grow more food to feed yourself and your family." "I am grateful to you," replied the American Indian, "but you see, I'm perfectly happy with what God has given me. If I had more land to cultivate, where would I find the time for singing?" Even the happiness we attain with the fulfillment of a desire is vicarious, essentially. It merely satisfies an idea in the mind. Things cannot give us happiness. A visitor to America from India remarked one day to his host, "You Americans pride yourselves on your freedom from superstition. Yet I can imagine no superstition greater than this, your expectation of finding happiness in inanimate objects. One man's meat, as the saying goes, is another man's poison, or one man's dosa is another man's poison. The enjoyment of things depends entirely on our expectation that we will find them enjoyable. What is pleasant to one person may be detestable to another. It all depends on the ideas they hold in their minds. Thus, desire weaves a subtle web around people's minds and hearts. A single strand may seem too weak to entangle them. Many strands together, however, form a net so strong that no one can escape it, except, as the Bhagavad Gita says here, by resolute control of the senses and by destroying at the root of sensory awareness the tendency to seek happiness in the fulfillment of desire. Aids to this process are given elsewhere in the Gita. They are daily meditation and deep inner communion with God. Thus, through the Bhagavad Gita, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om. This topic of desire, our great enemy, is so fundamental to the spiritual path, and yet it's helpful to understand it in differing ways, and also according to the different levels of experience that we've had. There's this beautiful chant of, I think it's Swami Sri Yukteswar, "Desire, my great enemy, with his soldiers surrounding me, is giving me lots of trouble, oh my Lord." And it's just so true. It's giving us lots of trouble. And the chant continues, "That enemy I will deceive, remaining in the castle of peace, night and day in thy joy, O my Lord." And there's another famous line later on in the chant, "Pranayam will be thy religion, pranayam will give thee salvation, and finally you won't have to fear anything anymore." And so, in the beginning, when we hear that desire is a problem, it can even take a while to even accept that thought, because on the one hand, we enjoy our desires. I remember once we were playing a game. I was brand new on the spiritual path, and I was with some old friends and some friends of those friends, and we were playing just some silly game. I don't even remember what it was, what the premise of it was. This was when I was in college. And one of the questions they asked of the group, if you could have one thing removed from your life, what would it be? I mean, there were many such questions, and so this was one. And I sat there for a moment and I said, desire. I would love to be free from desire. And, I was also, being new on the spiritual path, or at least my version of being new, I was very excited to tell the spiritual truths to people in an effort to, I don't know what, wake them up. It mostly just turn them off, turn them away, because it would just be very, just rough, because it was partly a reaction because I had been told so many untruths in my life and not had any answers to return with. And so it built up a little bit of, shall we say, tension. And then finally, when I had the truths, I was ready, like with a fire hose, to just spray them and push this adharma back. And so these poor people, walked right into my little hose spray, and I said, desire, knowing that they would not be able to relate to that, and in fact they didn't. Desire? Get rid of desire? Are you kidding? Desire is what makes life fun. It makes life good. It wouldn't even be worth living without desire. And I could have probably argued even then, had I been open-hearted enough to say, really, what you're wanting is not desire, but satisfaction of that desire. Do you really want that burning, aching, unfulfilled desire? No, you want the pleasure that comes when the desire is fulfilled. But anyway, I was not in a mood to actually speak in such a way as to be understood. So when in such moods, it's better not to speak at all. So I had that same reaction myself when I first, some of my first real exposure to these teachings, not Master's teachings, but the teachings of the Gita in general. I was of all places, I was at the Theosophical Society many years ago, in the 1990s, and I decided, what is all this philosophy about? Not Theosophical Society, any philosophy. And I picked a book off the shelves, and I opened it to a random page, and I said, I dare you to tell me something. Humility was not one of my strong points at that time. And it said, beware the constant trickery of the senses. And I said, ridiculous trickery of the senses, being tricked by my senses in that moment. And so I just said, you want people to be paranoid, that they're always worried lest they are somehow being deceived? Well, we are being deceived all the time. Even to think that this body is reality is a bit of a deception. And to think that we're alone facing all these challenges without our guru standing right by our side. If we don't realize he's right here, we are being deceived because he is right here. And so we come in time on the spiritual path to at least accept that desire isn't good because so many saints say it isn't good. You see, it's almost like it first starts to come into us as it's just not popular to say that desire is good because all these others say it isn't good. So I guess I'll kind of go along with them. And then we get confused too, because even the desire for God is a desire. Even the desire to meditate is a desire. So we start to wonder, should I give up desires for those things too? And it, as I said, can become a little bit confusing. Worst of all is that once we learn that we shouldn't desire, and yet we still do desire, then sometimes we can feel guilty about it. We can feel badly that, I know I'm not supposed to desire, and yet I do. And so I shouldn't, but I do. But I shouldn't, but I want it. And so we have this fight. Now, for trivial desires, as someone asked Swamiji, what if I'm sitting at home and I desire some ice cream, but I just won't let myself go out and get it? And Swamiji said, just have the ice cream. For trivial desires, what does it matter? We waste more energy in struggling against them when we could use that energy for other, more constructive purposes. He did say, though, even while enjoying the ice cream, don't just go and dive into it, but rather be a little bit aware of how, okay, I wanted this, I've had it, this first taste is so good, but maybe by the end of it, my tongue is so cold I can't even taste it anymore. Or it's just sort of worn off. That burning fire has been quenched by the first spoonfuls of ice cream and the rest is just sort of extra. And that also, try to hold back a little bit inwardly to say, though I'm eating this and enjoying it, I'm not just thinking that only this ice cream is giving me that enjoyment that I'm also enjoying in myself. Master said, I don't ask that you overcome temptation. I ask that you resist it. And so that means even if we yield to the temptation, still a part of us holds back. Master said the same thing, that even when indulging a desire, hold some part of yourself back to say, I'm not allowing myself to think that this is the thing giving me the joy. And this is in fact the whole basis of desire, that we put a condition on our happiness, as it says on the reading, and as Master said, once that condition is fulfilled, we get our happiness back again. This example that Swamiji gives, he's given in other books too of his, and it is an essential one that we often use, Dharmini and I, in our conversations. Like, for example, we might be waiting for something to come, like in this case, a microphone stand. We have a microphone stand that, as I've been saying, is eager to go on to its next life. And so we've ordered a new microphone stand, and when it came, there was great rejoicing that now it has come, and welcome, and come inside, and we opened the box and put it together, and it was broken. the microphone just would spin around, casually, just like a fan. So that's not very useful. So we had to return it. And so we had to call and do this. And then we had some other struggles in it. And so it keeps on delaying the fulfillment of the desire to get a new microphone stand. And so this is hopefully a trivial example, but still, it's one that there's just tension because I want and I don't have. And as Swamiji said, it's like pinching a part of our flesh and pinching it hard, saying, I need that microphone stand, or I need that money, or I need that job, or I need that person to go away. All these desires, And then finally, when the microphone stand comes, then, as we say, it is as Swamiji said, we suddenly unpinch ourselves. It feels so good, if you pinch yourself, and you might want to briefly do this even. You pinch yourself, then you let go. Such relief comes from it, and we have this sense, thank God, I feel so much better. But the silly thing is, it is we who pinched. And then in this unpinch, we feel such great joy. So often, whenever something like this happens, some thing that we've been waiting for happens, or some other thing that we were worried about finally works out okay, we will at first say, isn't it wonderful? And then we'll say, unpinch. That's all it was just an unpinch. We got an inverter and now the power doesn't go out. Yay, unpinch. That's all it is. All those worries. We were wrong to be worried in the first place. We were pinching our own hearts with that desire, saying, I am not fulfilled until until this outer condition is met. And so this is, in fact, one of the lines in the Nayaswami vow that Swamiji wrote, that I am complete in myself. And it's, of course, not just for that vow, but there's even chants, other things where this thought is put out, to feel complete in ourselves. Complete, because whatever emptiness we may have had has been filled by God. Complete, because in meditation we feel that calmness. We feel that completion. We feel open to receiving God who is within us. This, as Swamiji said, I just don't see how people live without meditation. He said the peace you get from meditation, not just the cumulative meditations over the years, but each day's meditation. He said, I have found in a given day how my meditation will bring such peace. It will give me insights, solutions to problems of the day, and so on. It will make me ready to handle whatever else the universe has in store for me. And so remembering that the antidote to desire is to feel something even greater. Because as he said, even in a physical way, even more pleasurable. He says even in a physical or in an outward way, that when we had a perfect day, part of that perfection came from not needing anything. We can think of it in terms of food. If we are hungry and we see all the different, things arranged before us and we just can't wait, we even start, first I will have this one, then I'll have some of that. And then we have the whole thing going all the way to the gulab jamun. The whole plan is mapped out. Then, what though if we have just finished that feast and then we turn around and someone offers us another one? It says, and now dokla. And we say, no. No, thanks. I'm sorry, I'm very full. And I not only I can't, but I don't need it. I'm fine. Or if you have eaten and then you're serving others and they're asking you, don't you need to eat? We say, no, I'm fine. This is true on another level. The more joy, the more love we have in our hearts. If we spend time in the morning eating, fulfilling our heart, filling our heart with that peace, then when we go out to others and they need help, they need peace, they need that love, we can offer that. Not only our own kindness and goodwill, which are important, but God, but Master flowing through us. And then we can certainly share with them because we ourselves are already full, we're already fed. This is why meditating, for example, in the morning is so helpful. because it fills us up so that we can go through the day well, so that we can survive the day. Because people don't always come to us and say, you know, my heart is feeling a little hurt, or I'm a little worried about this problem, or I'm a little afraid of all these unknowns with this COVID and all these things. They don't always come to us telling us that that's the need. They say, hey, what are you looking at? Get that look off your face. Shut up. And that's their way of saying, you know, my heart is feeling a little bit closed. You see, it's not actually always direct. And this is the problem. But anybody acting rude is not in a good mood. They are not happy. Otherwise, they would be more polite. They would be more patient. So it is just a cry for help. If we saw them with a broken shoulder or broken arm or missing an eye, we would rush them to the hospital. And that kind of rude behavior is the equivalent. They are telling us that some part of them is hurt. And so we can do our best to help, and then we can do our best to leave them to their healing, which is to say, go to some other room. So, one of the dangers, as I said, on the spiritual path is having desires, knowing I'm not supposed to, we can feel guilty. And guilt does no good at all. Of course we are going to have to struggle with this battle. Why would Sri Yukteswarji write a chant about it if it wasn't a big struggle, if it wasn't a big issue? Desire my great enemy, not desire my small enemy or desire one of many enemies, my great enemy. I don't know if he would say greatest, but it probably is in the running for greatest enemy. As Master said, desires ever fed, never satisfied. And at another point, he said, Master said, desires ever fed, never dead. And so we don't want to keep feeding them, but we don't want to feel guilty. I remember once I said to Swamiji, he had given in a book, Sadhu Beware, he had written that one way you as a devotee on the spiritual path, you want to let go of ego. You want to work on overcoming ego. And one of the ways to become an ego detective is to be aware, he said, for example, because the ego is located here at the medulla oblongata at the back of the head, to be aware whenever you feel some tension there. Whether you literally pull your head back or you just feel somebody says something and you feel this tensing there. And I thought to myself when reading that book that, strange, I don't recall ever feeling any kind of tension back there. Let me see if there is that. And so the next day, somebody said something I didn't like and there was this tension back here. And then somebody else said something else nice and I went, and I realized, wait, there's tension back there when I'm enjoying. Oh, yes, well, no, you don't have to talk like that. Maybe a little more, but that there's that indulging in that pleasure. And it was staggering how often there was tension in the back of the head that way. And so I had a chance to meet Swamiji. This was in Gurgaon. And I said to him, Swamiji, you've written this, and I was horrified to discover how many times I had this tension in the back of the head. And Swamiji replied, to my surprise, of course you would have tension in the back of your head. You have an ego just like everyone else as an incarnated being. And I wondered on that because as I said, I just didn't quite expect it. I was more or less saying it in what I thought was a humorous way. And it took me a while to understand what Swamiji may have meant. And I'm not completely sure. One thing might have been that he was saying, well, did you think you didn't have an ego? Because I've got news for you. But I did think that I had an ego, I think. But again, it never hurts to be reminded that I have many things to work on. But what I rather think Swamiji was trying to get me to understand was there was still a tendency in that for me to criticize myself, for me to feel guilty, to say, I'm just amazed at how much ego I have. And I think he was saying, don't exaggerate your faults out of proportion. Don't criticize yourself. Don't feel guilty. Don't think that somehow, you are any better than you are, but also don't think that you're any worse than you are. This was, of course, not applied to me, but applied to anyone, because I'm quite certain of another occasion when Swamiji said regarding guilt, if there's one word I wish we would eliminate from our vocabulary, it is guilt. We should not feel guilty if we have these desires. We should accept that this is part of where I am on the spiritual path. This is part of growth. Even Arjuna was asking Krishna about desires and so on, or Krishna felt the need to tell Arjuna about desires because it's the problem. Even worse is when we blame ourselves for yielding to desire as if the mere knowledge that we shouldn't have desire is enough to fight it. Or to put it another way, that because we knew we shouldn't and still we did, that proves we are insincere. Desire is not rational. It is deeper than rational. It is not something you can casually dismiss with the mind. The mind always follows the heart. Logic will always work according to what our own heart's feelings are, which is also to say, at times, our desire. And so our mind, you could say, is already infected with desire, the very desire it thinks it's trying to outsmart. You know how this works? We have a desire for something, and we think, no, I shouldn't. And then we think, well, I have a desire for maybe to eat 1 kg of Mysore pak. And so I think, well, no, I shouldn't. That's probably too much, and then we start to rationalize, well, on the other hand, I've had a fairly healthy breakfast this morning, and actually, I eat a fairly healthy diet. In fact, many people I know must eat less healthy diets than me, so I probably could have at least a ½ kg of the Mysore pak. And besides, other people here are on diets, and I wouldn't want them to feel tempted, so it would be easier for them if I were to just eat it all myself. It's really sacrifice that I'm willing to make for the family, and so on it goes until not only 1 kg is gone. Of course, if that were true, we would also be gone, but just there, it always comes in, the logic, because it's fueled by the desire. So don't think that by rationalization you can get out of it. And similarly, don't blame yourself when somehow you were still pulled. Even though I know better, but still I did it. And then when we beat ourselves up as devotees because we did that, it's wrong. It's not useful. I don't want to say it's wrong because then we say, oh, and I shouldn't be beating myself up either. We can end the cycle and just say, that's all right, Divine Mother. Grab the harmonium and start chanting. Start praying. Watch a video of Swamiji. Start meditating after you digest whatever it was. In other words, go find something spiritual to do. It's much easier to overcome our negative tendencies by putting energy in the positive direction. That's much easier than focusing on these negative things and taking them on. So throw yourself into God-reminding activities, and above all, meditation and Kriya Yoga, or the other techniques on this path. When we practice Kriya, as it was alluded to in this, and also Swamiji has said in other writings, it just removes that desire because it gives us the peace and calmness that we have inside. It reconnects us with that. And so we feel so good already that we're not looking for things to make us feel good. And furthermore, as I'm sure you may know, Kriya Yoga works actually literally on getting rid of desires, because these desires are not born just in the mind or just from seeing something and coming into our consciousness from outside. They are actually past desires are stored in our spine as vrittis is the word for them. This is the deeper explanation of why Patanjali says yogas chitta vritti nirodha. Yoga is the neutralization of these vrittis of feeling. is these whirlpools or vortices of feeling. But the deeper, another way to understand that is that these vrittis of desire, of trapped feeling, desires we had that were unfulfilled, but because we committed some of our energy, I want this or I don't want that, that energetic commitment is stuck as a little vritti in our spine. And just as the reading said that one spider thread of desire may not be too binding, but so many thousands, millions are. So one vritti, trapped energy in this river of energy of our spine, may not be much much of a blockage. The spine is filled with these vrittis, and so in their totality, there barely any energy can move at all. As Master said, the spines of most people are spiritually paralyzed. I don't think he was speaking of his disciples. I don't think he was speaking of Kriya Yogis. In any case, even if that were true of us, practicing Kriya is what unparalyzes our spines. It allows more energy to move through. It helps us to work through these desires. Really, desire and karma are more or less the same. If you want to get rid of past karma, you can think about it as getting rid of past desires. It's that karma is caused by desire. We may say, no, karma is action, and it is because I have done, so therefore I have some karma as a consequence of that. And that is true, but that action was initiated by desire, you see? And in fact, the strength of that karma depends upon the desire associated with that action. If we turn and accidentally hit somebody, on the cheek with our hand who we didn't see there, and say, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't realize. Are you okay?" We have karma because we hit someone in the face. But if, on the other hand, we saw someone said, "I've had just enough of you and all this stuff, and you know what? Pow!" And with great enthusiasm, we punch them in the face. That also is an action of hitting someone in the face. Yes, it's harder, but still, that has a much greater karma that comes back to us because we really wanted to do it versus this accidental thing. Now, I don't think this is a common occurrence for any of you, accidentally hitting, intentionally hitting, but you understand. Those things we do with little desire, again, by accident, have very little karmic consequence. But those things we really meant to do, those are the things that bring that karma back to us. And so this applies also with good karma, that if we devote ourselves, if we try, if we really put willpower into doing good, then that is much better for us than if we passively just sit along, I just, and then go to the, and then, Om Guru, and, with low energy. That doesn't draw. Better to do that than the opposite. But still, it's much more comes when we invest more energy into it. So anyway, with all of this, please don't feel guilty. Please do Kriya, because Kriya is what will get you out of all of these desires. It's the airplane route to God. It's the simple way you can succeed. Remember the story of one of Master's disciples who was an alcoholic and had his alcohol in one hand and his Kriya mala in the other hand. And he would do some Kriyas and then take a little hit off the alcohol and then do a little bit more. And his friend said to him, "You're a hypocrite. How can you think that, how can you want alcohol and be a drunk and then still also try to act spiritual?" And the man said, "I can't help that I have this desire, but at least I can also do something good." And then over time, he was continuing on in this somewhat unusual sadhana. And then one day he realized, he looked at the bottle in his hand, he said, "What do I need this for?" And he put it aside and he never touched it again. But he held on to his Kriya mala. And so in that same way, whatever it is we're struggling with, first of all, you're doing extremely well. Here you are facing all this world challenge that we're in. You're a yogi. You've come in perhaps even to be a part of helping the world during this time, but certainly also in freeing yourself through your meditation, through your devotion, through your service to Master, and again in satsang and in connection with spiritual family. And also, you have the antidote right here. The antidote to desire is not guilt, is not even strict denial and all these things. As Swamiji said, we learn more from having our desires fulfilled a little bit. Partly because we realize that it's not all that satisfying. That's an easier way, in a way, to get rid of desires. Have a little bit and go, that's what I wanted. It's not much. We're desperate for if I could just have human friendship, it would solve everything. And we finally get a good friend. And then maybe we say something accidentally to hurt their feelings and the person turns away from us for a time. And it's good for us to still be their friend. I don't mean that that's the end of the friendship, but we realize nothing in this world is perfect. Nothing is all quenching to our heart's desire for love. Nothing brings us outward. Nothing outward brings us deep peace inside. It can't. This is the world of duality. But inwardly, there is that great peace, and we can achieve it through our meditation, through our practice of Kriya, through our devotion to God. God bless you.